the 10th year of liking and being the male lead of his redemption. I knew that in the future, he would eliminate me, his implied. So I decided to take the initiative. I meticulously set up until he was caught by staying overnight. The next day, his neck bore. I blocked all his contact methods. The engagement ring he gave me, I sent it by and gave my blessing. Then I left the country without a. Years later, I returned to the country for a. As soon as I got off the plane, I was Liu Ruyan held tightly to the cutting his palm until the corners of his eye. His tone was filled with reckless obsession and long time no see. A few days ago, a massive headline dominated the Liu Ruyan's passionate night post left my. I scrolled through the post, almost tortured. The post was filled with an eye-catching grin. My fingers hesitated, but I still forced myself to open. Next to me, secretary watched my expression with some concern. I turned off the screen and let out a bitter laugh from my. Last night, I called him, but it was because he was at the mail. Secretary Li lowered. He was Liu Ruyan's secretary. He knew Liu Ruyan's movements. His reaction counted as it was the celebration banquet. Young Master Fush, you know he's the grandson of Liu Lao. President Liu had to show up to support. I raised my hand to interrupt. I coldly questioned. Support him to the bed? Secretary Li then with a pale expression. They're just rumors created. Don't worry. After all, you and President Liu are. I didn't wait for him to finish before I forced a. Feigning exhaustion, I said, no need to. Over the years, I've grown tired of hearing these. I tolerated his petty squabbles with Bojing, but this time, he's tarnished the food. Secretary Li was sweating the atmosphere inside the car. After a long pause, I continued. After all these, even if my heart were made of iron, it would. Secretary Li, I'm truly. Please pass a message to Liu. I wish him and young Master. After I tiredly slid the engagement ring and placed it in. This ring doesn't belong to me. Please help deliver it to young Master. I maintained a look until Secretary Li stepped out of the. As soon as he closed the door, I quickly wiped away told the driver to turn back to the and blocked Liu Rui. I promptly booked the earliest. After all this, I leaned back in my seat and let out. After years of. It was finally time to wrap. Liu Ruyan and I had grown up together. I was 2 years. We were betrothed as children. During childhood, Liu Ruyan was kidnapped, but no one knew the extent of the abuse. He returned screaming, and I noticed bruises on his. After that, he became withdrawn. Other children said he was ill and avoided, but I was the only exception in his. My father was pleased because Liu Ruyan adored me. It solidified the alliance. I was happy too because I liked Liu Ruyan. I once thought we would always be together until the appearance of Bai Jingchuan. Bai Jingchuan was the grandson of Liu Ruyan, and I met him at the Liu. He was wearing a white shirt, straight black hair, cool and composed, a face pure and beautiful. The butler introduced him, saying, he will attend school with you. Your mother asked me to remind you that Jingchuan, from now on he'll be you must take good care. After speaking, the butler gently pushed by. Liu Ruyan was absent-minded, fiddling with a trinket I had. He merely snorted coldly and, without even lifting his neck, however, showed his discomfort with. Still, Jingchuan blinked in and timidly extended his pail. Looking at Liu Ruyan, he said, I'm Jingchuan. Only then did Liu Ruyan lazily lift, smirking mischievously. Who's your sister? Which of my dad's mistresses are you? The air froze in an awkward. Jingchuan's eyes welled up with tears, his lips trembling with embarrassment. The butler's face turned pale and then cycling through. He finally explained helplessly that I don't like him. Make him leave. Liu Ruyan's eyebrows furrowed with as if in the next he would tear Jingchuan apart, fearing his temper would and leave everyone in it. I quickly pulled Jingchuan behind. I reassured him, welcome. If you don't understand anything in the future. Jingchuan looked at me and nodded. His eye, however, timidly lingered on Liu Rui. At the time, I didn't notice any. It wasn't until after dinner when Bai Jing persistently asking about Liu Ruyan's preferences and knowing Liu Ruyan's temper, I didn't say much. I simply advised him to avoid. Jingchuan, however, blinked in. But I think Sister Ruyan treats you, which means she's not a bad. I also want to be friends with Sister Brother Fu Shengsheng. You'll help me. I was speechless. That night, I had in the dream, it was a colorful romantic novel. Liu Ruyan was the proud and aloof female, and Bai Jingchuan was the male lead on a redemption. As for me, I was unsurprisingly the despised and hateful, and in the dream, Liu Rui was initially cold and withdrawn, but eventually she was warmed by Bai Jingchuan's sunny. As the antagonist, because I was engaged, I constantly flaunted my position. Like a clown, I stumbled through midway through the story, took away my influence, left me crippled. My family was ruined. On the day I was sent to prison, even then, I clung to the iron bars, crying and asking him, have you ever loved me? He looked at me, his tone filled. If I could, I'd rather have never met you. Those words echoed in my ears for a long. When I woke up, I couldn't help but in the days that followed, reality unfolded, perfectly mirroring the plot of the dream. Whenever Liu Ruyan unintentionally, he would awkwardly explain, I just felt sorry for him. The only person I love is you. Though he said he disliked Bai Jing and wanted him to leave, his cold gaze clearly softened. I didn't want to believe in. I deliberately went against, but in doing so, I faced all sorts of the misunderstanding and the gradual distancing. The last time I fell into the water with Bojang, Ruyan glanced at me, but went straight toward His eyes were filled with almost overflowing. I finally faced reality. I almost died. In that drowning, it was another childhood friend who found me. No longer. After that, I fell into a deep, relentless nightmares kept binding. I couldn't open my eye. In a half-dreaming, it felt like someone entered my. It was Bojang Chuan. I heard his sweet but venomous words. Still pretending to be. Why not happily return Sister Ruyan to me? If you keep pretending, there will be. As long as you say yes, the system can change your ending. Tears slowly filled my tightly shut. I could feel the pillow soaking with but I still gritted my teeth. If not for yourself, think of your parents. Do you really want them to go bankrupt and die? As time ticked away, I finally heard my hoarse, low voice, like sand. I heard myself say, okay. I knew if I directly asked the Liu family and my family. So after that, I started to deliberately distance and actively set her up with Bojang Chuan. Although she was initially frantic and confused by and explained her reasons for not under the influence of the plot, she eventually leaned towards Bojang. I wasn't sad anymore. I knew this would happen. While I played the role of someone who loved Liu, I bribed the media to repeatedly Finally, my father agreed to the annulment. Rather than an alliance, he cared more about the stock price. Thinking of this, I opened among the messages from friends asking where I was hanging out. The latest one was from Bojang Chuan. It had only 6 words. I let out a cold laugh, removed the SIM card without hesitation, boarding a flight. After boarding, I sat next to a woman who had already She wore a black dress, appearing composed and gentle. I greeted her politely. She took off her sunglasses with grace. Seeing her face clearly, I gasped in surprise. Lin, what are you doing here? Lin Tianyue smiled and handed me a golden postcard. It's the of the designer you've always admired. I thought it might be useful for your. I took the postcard from her and feeling my eyes sting. Since childhood, my dream was to be. But after Bojang Chuan appeared, my life turned upside down. I no longer treasured fashion magazines I stopped studying design knowledge, stopped sketch. I was busy every day fighting and battling the unchangeable. In the struggle, I unknowingly became the villainous. All these years, not only Liu Ruyan, my closest, but even I almost forgot how much I loved design. I turned away, pretending to rub my teary eyes. I had played the abandoned role, betrayed and hurt by Liu Ruyan, used as a tool by my father for. I had long gotten used to pretending not to care. But now, when someone showed me a little, I panicked, unsure of how to respond. I felt like a beaten dog, afraid to take the bone. So I forced a light-hearted joke. I didn't want him to notice so I joked lightly, pretending to be. Thanks for earlier, but first, tell me, what do you do? You weren't stalking me, were you, Lin Tianyue? Lin Tianyue snapped his and pretended to act profound. Good question. Maybe because someone sent their resume to a design school. What they didn't was that the person reviewing resume, he saw your photo on my social media and told me everything. I wanted to help by but now I'm being called a weirdo. Saying this, Lin Tianyue hugged his arms, but his eyes smiled as I smiled back and carefully put the business card away. Blushing, I softly thanked Lin. He handed me my usual motion sickness, his dark pupils calm and reassuring. Get some good rest. After landing, I'll take care of everything. I nodded lightly. That night, seasons passed. Geese flew south. Unknowingly, several years slipped by. In these years, under Lin Tianyue, I apprenticed under the renowned designer. John's quirky personality unexpectedly I traveled with him, seeking inspiration. I listened to the wind sitting in Edinburgh, watched clouds by the Fiji, and lay lazily on Swiss meadows. Joyful and beautiful, free and at ease. Afraid I'd get bored, Tianyue often joined me on my travels. The people and events of those intense and complex gradually faded into the distance. I rarely thought of Liu Ruyan and Bojang. In my old city, apart from my ailing mother, there was nothing holding. When my teacher asked me to return, I hesitated for thinking of Liu Ruyan and their I still felt but I heard from that Bojang Chuan and Liu Ruyan. I thought the plot was no longer a threat. Gradually, I let my guard. Additionally, the doctor said my mother's health. My father, angry at my son, had my mother call me. I was truly worried. I wanted to bring my mother over, which meant after making up I accepted with my teacher and boarded a flight back to my home. September in Beijing carried us. The sky was a clear blue, except for a faint, misty streak, as white as As soon as I stepped out of a liaison came forward to take my. I followed them to the park, but the black car ahead grew increasingly. The unease in my heart grew. I clenched my fist, my steps slowing. After seeing the license plate clearly, but behind 5 or 6 bodyguards had surrounded. The next second, There was a click and the car door. I slowly turned my head. Liu Ruyan, dressed in an elegant red gown, stepped out. He leaned casually against, gazing ahead with a delicate expression. Knowing there was no escape, I exhaled deeply and forced myself to. Liu Ruyan casually played with the engagement ring I had given Secretary. He silently looked at me. Adjusting my mindset, I raised my gaze to meet Liu Ruyan's. His features had grown colder and more refined. What was once youthful and tender was now decisive and commanding. An oppressive aura of radiated from his every. I saw the dark like a caged bird, destined to. He was determined. Since I was young, I knew Liu Ruyan had unpredictable. Back then, my decision to would definitely have. But at that time, his entire focus was on Bojing. My voluntary departure. He shouldn't have held a grudge. Why is he stirring up trouble? I forced a polite smile to maintain. I decided to greet him first. Xiaoyan, long time no see. Just as I spoke, Liu Ruyan's hand playing with a diamond ring. The sharp edges cut his palm. Blood seeped out. And in the quiet, I could even hear my own heart. He gazed at me in silence for a long. The coldness in his eyes burned intensely. Finally, he spoke slowly, his tone soft and gentle. But if you listen close, you can hear the obsession and madness. That tender voice. Long time no see. I'm engaged to but I've been kidnapped by Liu Ruyan. I don't know where I am now, but the villa I'm in is an exact replica of the Liu family's old. Every detail in my bedroom has been meticulously, from the bed sheets to the smallest decor. I don't understand Liu Ruyan's. Right after locking me in he went to meet Bojing Chuan for a wedding. Yes, the timeline matches the plot perfect. They're getting married. He's marrying the male protagonist. Then why did he kidnap a villain who should have faded from? Too bad I don't have Bojing Chuan. I can't ask the silent bodyguards guarding me. They're like wooden stakes, saying nothing. Liu Ruyan threw away my phone too. I can't contact anyone. If I die in this villa, no one will know about this mad. It's been years. His condition seems to have. Liu Ruyan returned late at night. I sat on the sofa with my arms crossed. On the coffee table was something I found in his a trinket I had once given. It was a ceramic charm of an anime. The character was from his favorite anime. He used to cherish it deeply. Whenever he would unconsciously play with. Back then, I sweetly thought it was our little secret. But after the thread on the necklace broke, I never saw it again. I thought it was long gone, but he had kept it intact in a box. Liu Ruyan, why did you bring me here? What do you plan to do about my meeting? Liu Ruyan took off his gold rim, leaning against the sofa. His demeanor was refined. We've already broken off. I didn't agree to. His shamelessness made me. When people are speechless, I let out a cold chuckle. I sneered after. How did you become so disgusted? The news of your wedding has been trending for 3 days. What do you mean by this now? Are you still hung up on? Do you want to keep me? Liu Ruyan remained silent. After a moment, he spoke. That was indeed my plan. I was genuinely enraged. I grabbed the charm from the coffee table and threw it at his face. I missed, and the ceramic charm shattered. Liu Ruyan's expression changed. There's nothing between The strawberry marks before you left weren't real. They were from lipstick. Marrying him is something I have no. Shenxing. Trust me, please. Give me a few more years. I will handle everything, including Bojing Chuan. Liu Ruyan raised his his tone carrying a hint of what reason could you possibly. Could it be that? I let out a cold. The words reached my lips. He said he had no choice but to. Could it mean that he's also aware of the plot? Everything he's doing is dictated by the story. But even if that's true, what does it change? The harm he caused me was real. If it weren't for Lin Tian, I might have actually drowned that time. I decided long ago to. What's more, I can't guarantee the plot won't. And who knows what Bojing Chuan's might do to my mother. I've been trying so. I no longer have a choice. Thinking of this, my expression, I spoke bluntly. Let me go, Liu Ruyan. Don't make things difficult. Liu Ruyan lowered his head, the tenderness in his eye transforming into years ago due to special I couldn't protect you. I had to let you get hurt. Let you go abroad, let you get entangled with Lin Tianyue. But now I'm in control of the city. I won't let you leave me again. You'll stay here with me for. Isn't it nice? Just the two of us. Liu Ruyan's gaze was fervent. He took out the engagement ring and we'll never be apart again. I could no longer contain my fury. Ruyan, you're insane. I stood up and slapped him hard across his head turned from the his hair slightly disheveled. Stray strands covered his pale skin. I slapped him with all my strength. Very quick, his cheek turned red with a handprint visible. The contrast under the light had an eerie beauty. He pressed his tongue and let out a nonchalant. He grabbed my trembling hand and gently blew on. The warmth of his breath, a ripple of unease ran down my spine. I struggled to pull my hand away. At that moment, his invasive voice said, "Does it hurt? Eat something first. You'll need energy to vent your." Before I could react, he picked me and carried me upstairs. Secretary Li was standing sweating nervously. Who knows how long he had been listening. He wiped his forehead and cautiously watching his boss get must have been a test of his profession. Clean up the pieces on the floor and invite the chef from Deshanlu to prepare. I like their dishes. Secretary Li nodded hurriedly and retreated. Meanwhile, as Liu Ruyan injected me with, I fell unconscious. When I woke up, the villa was empty except for Secretary Li. How do I get out? Hearing my question, He forced a bitter smile. Please don't make things difficult. You should give up on this idea. President Liu removed because he didn't want you to feel any. But young Master Fu, you know, seems like you know more about being. Liu Ruyan seems loyal indeed. I laughed bitterly. Is that so? Secretary Li gave a modest smile. Truly. Otherwise, how could the dime end up in Liu Ruyan's hands? Hearing this, Secretary Li seemed to start sweat. As I gradually made my way to the. Secretary Li followed behind me and persuaded. You can't even go out the. Who said I was leaving? Then what are you doing? The mountain opposite, I said. Secretary Li looked in the direction. She glanced at the distance. She nodded, half understanding. When Liu Ruyan returned, I claimed I had and said I wanted to go for a walk. Liu Ruyan looked at me thoughtfully. I don't even have my phone. What are you afraid of? That fine, go, she said. I rolled my eyes disdain. Yang Zhuang, let's go. Liu Ruyan saw that I was. She softened her tone and said, just go. You're not well. You can't stay in the wind too. The next day, Liu Ruyan, Secretary Li, and took me up the mountain. We had just reached the rest area, not far down the mountain. A commotion. Liu Ruyan and I looked. It must be Bojing. Lin Tianyue and Liu Ruyan raised her eyebrows, then glanced at me. Your phone is with. How could I have contacted them? Or maybe Bojing Chuan and came looking for you by. I smirked sarcastically and replied in a mock. Bojing Chuan and Lin Tian had already spotted Liu Ruyan. Bojing Chuan's cold face twisted the moment he saw him, but being the male lead he was, he quickly regained. He looked at me in disbelief. Long time no see. Where have you been? Why didn't you let me know? I caught the fleeting. The plot had already reached the point of the lead. I didn't feel like keeping up the charade. I couldn't be bothered. I subtly nodded at Lin Tianyue. Then, I began exchanging pleasantries with Bojing Chuan's expression. He bit his lip timidly, sitting next to Liu, clinging to Liu Ruyan's arm. It's been so many. Brother Fu Shengxing. Are you mad at you? I looked at him impatiently. Bojing Chuan glanced at Liu, then at everyone else. His eyes began to well up. I know that Sister Ruyan was originally, and I took your place. But Brother Fu Shengxing, you two were so young. How could such an engagement? Besides, true love knows. I really like Sister Ruyan. Even though she always tells me it's not my fault, I still feel very sorry. Bojing Chuan's teardrops fell like innocently beautiful. Liu Ruyan she said nothing, but her deep, dark eyes remained. Everyone present wore expressions of interest. I curled my lips into a cold. To you, maybe Ruyan is true love. To me, she's just discarded. My words were pointed. Bojing Chuan's innocent and fragile expression. He bit his lip tightly. A flicker of resentment. Liu Ruyan stared at me into the veins on her pale arm. Just when I thought this lunatic, she dropped the words, I'm going out, then coldly walked off. The atmosphere grew stiff and off. No one dared offend Liu Ruyan, but they silently cursed their for making them hear this. After a while, a childhood friend, summoning some courage. Then I'll pick number 4. Truth or dare? Truth or dare? Who's number 4? The boy who drew the king card asked excited. Everyone hesitated. Lin Tianyue paused. He revealed the red card in his hand. I'm number 4. His tone was unhurried. The boy with the king seemed to have a crush on Lin. He shyly asked, then I choose truth. Is there anyone here you like? Hearing this question, Lin Tianyue always swept his eyes over everyone. The people present were quick-witted. They immediately started to tease him. Miracle of miracles. Shh, be quiet. Let's hear what he said. The room fell silent. Then, we heard Lin Tianyue answer decisive. Yes. The room erupted in. Everyone glanced, exchanging. Liu Ruyan, having finished her cigarette, her hand casually resting on the armrest. I froze mid-sip of my. But she didn't move. Instead, she leaned over, looking at. After a friend explained the game rules, she smoothly sat down next to me. The next round began, and the king. I choose dare. Then let number 3 and number 6 I'm number 3. I'm number 6. Liu Ruyan and I spoke at this. Liu Ruyan leaned back, lazily, a smile on her lip, her gaze sharp as a. Without thinking, in front of me, frowning as I prepared. But in the next second, the glass was snatched away by Lin. I'll take the punishment for you. Lin Tianyue drank it all and placed the. Everyone applauded and cheered. Only Liu Ruyan raised her eyes. She twirled her fingers at the corner of her. I knew her too well. I sensed trouble. Sure enough, the following events unfolded. Liu Ruyan almost always drew the king card. Each time, she targeted Lin Tianyue. I couldn't stand her petty tact and decided to end the. But Liu Ruyan wasn't done. I entrusted the drunk to a trusted friend and asked him to take Lin Tianyue back. Turning around, I saw Bojing Chuan standing behind Fu Shengxing. I really underestimated. Bojing Chuan and I walked to a near. There, he finally dropped his innocent. Glaring at me, he snarled. I was wondering why my progress. So it's because you. Why can't you just stay? If it weren't for the little time I wouldn't resort to this. Before I could react, Bojing Chuan lunged and I was knocked to the ground. I instinctively protected my head. Sorry, Fu Shengxing, but as long as you live, I'm doomed. Standing at the top of the slope, I rolled down until a tree stopped my fall. The impact felt like it dislocated. Luckily, I was still able to stand. I had initially planned to escape, but facing Liu Ruyan and her body, knowing Liu Ruyan's person, if I sought help, even my friend here in this remote wilderness, Bojing Chuan unintentional a chance to escape. Having been to Africa, I had learned some wilderness, so I wasn't too afraid. I limped and stumbled, but I hadn't anticipated Liu Ruyan when the bodyguards dragged me back to the villa. Liu Ruyan was still searching the mountain. Secretary Lin said the bodyguard who had already been dealt with by Liu Ruyan. It has already been handled. The night outside is heavy. The stars are a sudden thunderclap rang out. It started drizzling outside. I sat silently on the sofa, watching. The rain grew heavier. Liu Ruyan returned. Secretary Li took Liu Ruyan's coat and he stood in the hall. I couldn't see his face. Water dripped from him, soaking wet. His wet bangs exuded a cold chill. Where's the bodyguard watch? Careless in their duty. Already buried. They were pierced. Let me send him back. I can't touch him now. I'll give you an explanation within half a month. Liu Ruyan walked toward. His face was a little pale. The lashes under his brows. The room was only the faint light of lightning. Why could you take action but not deal with the neck? Proceed cautiously. You know you'll face punishment if you act. The air was silent. I quietly looked at him for When did you awaken? After being kidnapped by Liu Yuling's. Liu Yuling is Liu Ruyan's father. So you're different. The plot hurt me. Liu Ruyan bowed his head in a pot. He knelt slightly, but the night seemed even. You can't resist the plot. You can't resist the neck. You could only kill a bodyguard, and imprison an insignificant Liu Ruyan. You're not just a man. You're a reckless, helpless in the. He carried a cloud of rainwater and blood scent. He let out a mocking laugh, slowly raising. I'm mad, but in your heart, who is the he? Zero unread code. I turned my head away. Liu Ruyan pinched my cheeks, forcing me to turn and meet his gaze. Another thunderclap. Just playing with you abroad for a few years? Then what do the years of our relationship? Do you know that the way you looked at him made me want to stab him to death right away? Liu Ruyan's eyes were filled. The smoke in his tone made me panic. You're not allowed to hurt. Liu Ruyan, there's nothing between. I won't run away anymore. Please don't hurt him. I softened my tone, trying to soothe. Liu Ruyan's bloodshot eyes were. He looked at me without moving. The next moment, he directly carried me into my bedroom. The room was warm, but his soaked body was freezing cold. My back felt only a chill. The hairs on my neck stood on it, each strand. No matter how I struggled, Liu Ruyan's face remained. Liu Ruyan, what are you doing? I never wanted to act. I hoped you would willingly stay here with, but proceed cautiously. I am truly disappointed. Liu Ruyan's voice was calm. He spoke slowly. I'm still not good at what I can only go about it in my own. Liu Ruyan threw me onto the bed. One hand pressed me down firmly, like a chain. He leaned over, burying his face in. He took a deep breath. It seemed both satisfied as if involuntary. The feeling was too unfamiliar. I struggled in fear, but the cold, deep-eyed woman didn't budge. That night, the thunder and leaves mixed, encasing the villa like dark clouds on a. I became increasingly. Liu Ruyan stayed by my side occupying all my space. To cheer me up, he moved all my design drafts to. I glanced at them. Still, I sat silently. Liu Ruyan, helpless about, could do nothing. The turning point came on Liu Ruyan's Secretary Li, and most of the bodyguards were sent to. The door was forcefully broken open by Lin, and I was rescued. Before returning home, I had a bad feeling. To be safe, I implanted a chip in my thigh. I agreed with Lin Tianyue if I couldn't be contacted, he would come to the location of my chip. That's why Lin Tianyue appeared. But we all knew it wouldn't be easy for me to get. So he brought Bo Jingchuan, and even so unexpectedly, Liu Ruyan was adamant and refused. Lin Tianyue waited for an opportunity until. After leaving the villa, we switched cars. Lin Tianyue acted alone, throwing off the pursuing body. Dragging my exhausted body, I headed to the hospital, planning to take my mother and leave. But there was no sign of only my father, who was supposed to attend, was quietly waiting. Beside him was a pure white wedding. Your mother passed away a year ago. To trick you into coming back, I lied to you. My father spoke indifferently. I was stunned, my heart sinking into I even forgot how to breathe. It felt like a pair of large hands. Tears instantly rolled down. I opened my mouth, but not a single. My father then looked at the pure white wedding. Instead of being, Liu Ruyan went all out to marry you. The bride price is 10% of. That's why I kept your mother's death. With this portion, our Fu family becomes the top family. Be cautious. Love and family can't put food on but money can. Bo Jingchuan has already been dealt. Today is your wedding with her. And Liu Ruyan dressed. The girl is still waiting for you. My father's tone carried, but was heavy with its. My dad was a true live-in son. As a driver, he gained favor. Eldest daughter. The old master opposed this mismatch, but couldn't overcome my mom's. After marriage, my dad. Once the Fu family fell into, he began showing his true ruth. My mom, repeatedly betrayed by, suffered severe psychological trauma. She could only survive on. The only times he treated her better were when I proved useful. So from a young age, I desperately tried. I lived with Liu Ruyan in the Liu. Got engaged to Liu Ruyan. I followed all his arrangements obedient. Even so, my mother still met a tragic end. At this moment, the female assistant intending to take. I struggled fiercely, tears blurring my vision, grabbing the scissors on the table and charged at my father. You killed her! You killed her! I shouted, but still got his arm cut by. The bodyguards outside rushed in, a sedative. When I groggily woke up, I found myself once again locked in Liu. The difference, this delicate chains bound my hands, and I was holding a wedding. Be cautious. You promised not to run away again. Lu Ruyan caressed my neck gently. Her palm was dry and warm, her gaze obsessed with a sickly kind of intimacy. You knew I would run away, so you and my father deliberately. He chuckled lightly when he heard this. His expression was calm, but I just wanted you to see that I am the only one you can rely on. And Lin Tianlei was forced by to drive off a cliff into the sea. My face turned pale and I looked at him weakly. When are you planning to kill me? How could I kill you? I did all this just to be with you forever. I've already made a deal with Bojing Chuan. I complete his and he gives me a new he's now locked up in a mental hospital. That time when I swore I would make him suffer. And now I've finally done it. Shenqing, there's no obstacle between. I sneered coldly. Liu Ruyan, who wants to be with you forever? I will definitely, and when you kill me, I will accept it. Handing you the weapon, our gazes met in midair. Liu Ruyan leisurely sliced and fed it to my lip. Before killing me, have an orange. I turned my head away, coldly saying, I want to see Bojing Chuan. The room was damp and mold. Bojing Chuan was in the worst. Secretary Li he lay dying on the white sheets. Several doctors surrounded him the room was filled with surgical. I didn't know what they were. Some were stained with. It seemed Bojing Chuan he was trembling and his pale forehead covered in cold sweat. He heard the door open. His dim eyes suddenly lit up. And when he saw Liu Ruyan, he cried out, Sister Ruyan, you're finally here. Please make them let me. All you bastard doctors, get out. Bojing Chuan kept cursing, but when he saw the figure behind, he immediately fell. Didn't you fall off the mount? How are you still alive? I finally saw Bojing Chuan's system. The system started a slideshow-like presentation revealing all the causes. Scene after scene flashed like a movie playing out before Bojing Chuan. The system's screen froze on one sentence. Host, your mission has failed. You will be erased. Upon seeing this, Bojing Chuan's emotions. I'm the protagonist. Liu Ruyan, how could you do? I'm supposed to be your male. I was so close to succeeding. Why? How did it turn out? Bojing Chuan clung to my leg and Fu Shenqing, you ruined everything I had. Bojing Chuan, with increasing raised his head, no longer as confident as before, only to fall heavily. I coldly watched Bojing Chuan lose. My gaze hesitantly landed on the surgeon. I swiftly grabbed the knife, pointing the blade at Liu Ruyan's. Secretary Li, who was guarding the door, and immediately rushed in. Panic. Young Master Fu, don't act. Secretary Li was so anxious he stomped his feet. But you're even more despicable. As I moved the knife closer, pressing it against Liu Ruyan. Liu Ruyan looked at me, expressed, you're mad because I killed. I was shaking with rage. Liu Ruyan's eyes were cold. Her pale fingers suddenly gripped, guiding the knife further against her neck. Go ahead, Shenqing. Dying by your hand would fulfill. Liu Ruyan raised her neck, looking down at me. Her lips curled into a faint. Director Liu, please. Secretary Li stood anxiously beside her, waving his hands. I bit my lip hard and shouted angrily. Do you think? A group of bodyguards rushed? Liu Ruyan raised a hand, her lips still carrying a calm. Shenqing, kill me. I'll give you only this one, she whispered softly. Or can't? That sentence completely. My eyes reddened. And just as I was about, Liu Ruyan forcefully tackled me. I only heard her grunts. I sat up in shock, trembling. Bojing Chuan stood, shaking, holding the knife, the blade pointed downward. Behind Liu Ruyan, a wound had opened. In an instant, the bodyguard disarming Bojing Chuan and pinning him. Secretary Li quickly held her. Bojing Chuan, once eloquent, suddenly seemed crying helplessly. I wanted to kill Fu. If I kill him, everything, then I can go home. No one listened to him. Liu Ruyan's warm blood seeped into the strong smell of blood like an invisible net, tight. My vision was drenched in. I struggled to stand, but Liu Ruyan clung tightly to pulling me into her embrace. Even when the doctors arrived, they couldn't. Secretary Lai held me, forcing me to follow, to wait outside the opera. Liu Ruyan was she was unconscious. Secretary Li originally wanted to keep, but Lin Tianyue had called the police before. The police had already arrived. He couldn't keep me there. Under the protection of others, I left the hospital without. Later, I saw the news and learned that Lin Tianyue, he had been rescued. I met him face to face. He wasn't seriously in. Both he and I will testify as witness. Next, Liu Ruyan will face the justice of the law. On the day Liu Ruyan was, the Fuji Corporation, being deeply, also started receiving my father as the legal representative. At that time, I was sitting in a cafe across, meeting Lin Tianyue, whom as a renowned designer. This time, I came as a plan to Paris to discuss with international brands. Lin Tianyue, so we arranged to meet. We relaxed and chatted about that game of king on the. So, who did you like back then? I eagerly gossiped and asked. Lin Tianyue's gaze he pretended to think deeply for a while. As my patience was running, he finally spoke in his soft teeth. The person I liked still owes me a penalty. I froze for 2 seconds. My cheeks flushed red. Paris in early spring. The tranquility scented with streams rushed past the street corners.